Hi, so I'm going to talk about how we don't have to just play opposite game with like our enemies. Like we don't have to, just the way we shouldn't have TDS, we shouldn't have Trump derangement syndrome, even though Trump is a scumbag. It doesn't mean that we should have TDS like the shitlibs have, where we can't differentiate things that Trump says that happen to be correct or good or something, and then the terrible things that Trump might say. So like the same is true in general. Like a lot of the radical left has like USA derangement syndrome, where they kind of, they just somehow are just not in, they basically idolize every other country. It's the long and the short of it. And it's, oh wait, my cat wants to get in just a sec. Oh wait, no, doesn't want to get in. Anyway, so there's a lot of leftists who, defend Assad, and oh my god, this cat, what? Do you want to come in? What do you want? Whatever. Weirdo. Alright, this is my cat. Hi, cat. No. 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 Alright. So, well, so basically, there's no need to take sides in these things. That's like the silliest, like in the Cold War, or in the oh my god, Oreo, my cat is terrorizing me. Anyway, there's no need to take sides. There's no need to defend Assad. There's no need to defend Gaddafi. There's no need to defend Saddam Hussein. There's perfectly good reasons. If you're anti-interventionist, and I mean, I'm not absolutely anti-interventionalist. I think that just might depend on the situation. I mean, maybe I should be absolutely anti-interventionalist, but I'm certainly not like as a concept. As a concept, if there was if the US government was an actual democracy, like a constitutional democratic republic, and it could help all the common people of the world overthrow their shitty governments, so we could have a free world, and like a socialist world, and like a just world, that I would totally be down for that. But it tends to be that, our government is controlled by sociopaths, terrorists, mass murderers, war criminals, and has been for a long time. I don't know if it has always or not, but I know it has been during my lifetime. So that's enough of, like, you're not gonna win over, like, if you're trying to win over people to be anti-interventionist or be against against military action in a particular country, like, if like lionizing or even just giving a pass to the whoever, you know, whatever shitty government is probably in whatever country, because, you know, every country almost has a, or arguably every country has a tyrannical government. And, you know, certainly that includes the US. But I mean, the fact that this kind of like hyper, like, it's a funny thing, you know, because it makes me suspicious. These, some supposed leftists, when they act like hyper nationalists, when they're talking about other countries, like they might be totally right that that the U.S. shouldn't, you know, that we should try to prevent the U.S. from any type of intervention in general, just because they're always going to use it for something sinister and to take more power or whatever. But that shouldn't require like it shouldn't require giving a pass to like those shitty governments. And honestly, trying to give a pass to those shitty governments is just hampers your cause. Like, it, that gives strength to the interventionalists, because then they say, oh look, the anti-interventionalist cause is simply a pro dictator, or, you know, pro whoever the corrupt government is, cause. And but, you know, there's a lot of people who they're kind of almost like, if you call them a name, they'll be liable to like accept the name and run with it or something. Like, if I don't know, it's a mess. I mean, like, at this time, I would like to highlight the OPCW whistleblower issue. I mean, that's a great reason why, like, that's convincing to me as somebody who's not an absolute anti-interventionalist, but like, I'm not an absolutist, I'm not a pacifist, certainly, but that's convincing to me. Just like with going into Iraq, like, I had no love for Saddam Hussein, and I still don't. But I was very anti-war, at least for the second war. For the first war, I think I was probably, I mean, I don't know that much about it. I was a kid, you know, I was like 10 or something. I didn't know that much about it. But, you know, I was against the invasion of Iraq by George W. Bush, partly just, or largely because of how it was sold. You know, I mean, maybe if it had been sold to me as something like totally humanitarian, and that they were gonna, you know, give democracy to them and do all these, you know, that it was, that basically that any government being, you know, tyrannical and oppressive, as the Baathists are, would be like a death warrant. And then, you know, that could be well applied like throughout the world and even in the US. So like, I could pretend, I mean, I would have been at least like given that a chance, but the lies about weapons of mass destruction, and just the way they tried to ram it through with this nonsense, as if like, I mean, just the hubris for the US to talk to any country about their weapons is a non-starter for me. And I think you have to have like worms in your brain for that to like even make sense. To, like, the US, you know, has like all the weapons. So I think there's a lot of ways that, you know, like that, like when I found out that at the Chemical Weapons Agency, I believe it's called the OPCW, they went to inspect the report of chemical weapons attack by the Assad government in Syria, and it turned out that basically the top experts that they sent in determined that there was probably not a sarin gas or whatever it was. That probably wasn't the cause of death. And they said that there seemed to be signs that it was staged, or the chance that it was staged, or I don't forget the exact wording, but basically, it's a big deal, and it was covered up. And I think a lot of the people that were basically removed and just replaced by new experts that were going to play ball. So that's something that makes me more like, I think as somebody, that's more convincing to show people stuff like that, to show that what the US is doing, they're already doing it in a shady way. Like, so there's no reason to think that what they're doing in general there is not shady. Or at least, that's what it certainly looks like from my limited knowledge of the situation. But I do know enough about, the Baathists like Assad and, Saddam, that I do like cringe whenever leftists, give them a pass, or even like give them credit. I mean, it's more the edgelords and tankies and stuff that try to lionize them, but it's more the kind of giving them a pass and saying, well, they had to do what they had to do to maintain order and everything, which, maybe that's true, but I mean, it's not true. Like, you can't, like, the way that Assad, bombed his way, and, with Russia's help and whatever, bombed the shit out of his country. I don't think there's any there's any way to justify that. So, like, I fully support Syrian revolutionaries that are, like, moderates. I mean, I know that there's some people would say they don't exist. Maybe they were all killed, but there were the FSA people that were relatively moderate, and there certainly was a movement in Syria for justice against their shitty government, which, the Western left used to support. And, I think, was it Anonymous that helped them get internet back or something when I think it turned out later it was the CIA that cut the internet, but they blamed it on Assad or something like that. But regardless, like, Occupy, there was a movement, Occupy Syria, and maybe that's, but anyway, like, that was in 2011, that was a student, uprising, and there was a lot of, unions involved, and the left generally in Syria was involved, and it was, crushed. And, like, part of what set it off was the Assad put a kid in jail, like, who was, like, I don't know if he was like 10 or 15 or something. I think he was like 10 or something, and for writing, I think, "Down with the regime" on a wall. And I mean, I guess people can say, like, maybe all this information and everything's made up about Syria, but from what I understand, I mean, a lot of the main points have not really been disputed by the regime itself or by the Russians or whatever. And they certainly have, there's evidence that they bombed very extensively throughout Syria, and that they, imprisoned a lot of people. And there's, I've heard that they actually initially, in the early days of the revolution, they released, that Assad released a bunch of jihadis from jail during the Occupy Syria protests, and that was a way to maybe, help kickstart some Al Qaeda, ISIS thing, so that to basically, as a excuse to crush all dissent in the country or something like that, and then say, oh, it's all just a jihadi thing. So I think it's good to challenge all the official narratives on everything and just get to the truth, but if it involves this kind of adulation, or like I say, just giving a pass to other terrible governments just because they're not our terrible government, and just because you somehow decided you only have space in your heart to hate one terrible government, and so other victims of their other governments are just shit out of luck. There's a lot of people that are ostensibly leftists, anti-imperialists, that end up speaking in very strong statist, authoritarian terms of statist sovereignty. They start talking about, well, that's their country and it doesn't matter what their government is doing to their people in their country, and that's their government, that's their elected government. Or it's just all the arguments that would be used against, it's unnecessary, because I think a lot of that is not really going to convince people, but also it's the same arguments that can be used to justify our own enslavement, because they'd say, well, if there was some other country that could somehow liberate the American working class, that argument would say, well, sure, the U.S. government, let's say the government went all out and just started rounding up everybody that wasn't a total loyalist, and just executing us all in the streets. And Mexico, was thinking maybe we should help and save their lives. But then that's their country, that's their government. It's just morally, that's an immoral way to think about things. It's just so I still think a lot of people might have their heart in the right place when they're saying some of this stuff, but when you're veering into just hardcore statist, authoritarian sovereignty, absolutism, it's not helping the argument, and it's right wing. It's it undermines our position here, it undermines everybody's position everywhere if you just treat governments well, that's the government of the country, so therefore it's legitimate. Or acting even just how cavalierly a lot of people on the left dismiss the Syrian rebels, all Syrian rebels, and say they're all terrorists. There's a lot of Tulsi says that, says they're all terrorists. A lot of people have said that. And there certainly are people that, probably are terrorists basically among them. Among the al-Nusra and the ISIS, and maybe probably all those people on some level, they're all terrorists. But there certainly were other revolutionary groups that were more just generalized groups that were not super radical Islamist or whatever. They may have been partly religiously motivated, but they also were motivated by wanting freedom. And I just think there was a whole spectrum of people that were opposed to Assad, and I mean, it's like, it's just disgusting, you know, when because that'll be us, you know, like if we ever have to like resist the, you know, our government purging us or something like that, and then they'll just say, well, they're all terrorists and whatever, and then, you know, it's just the same thing can be done to us, like, um and it's just, yeah, I mean, you shouldn't just lightly call people terrorists. And for like somebody like Tulsi to say, um, you know, all the every rebel is a terrorist, but she wouldn't never call Assad a terrorist. Doesn't sound like. I mean, maybe she says she might have called him a dictator or something, but I don't think she's ever called him a terrorist. So it's like the real crime is for them to just not be the government, but try to break the government's monopoly on force. Like all these arguments are very statist arguments, like the idea that, oh, anybody who challenges the state's monopoly on force is automatically a terrorist. I mean, for one thing, terrorism originally referred to state violence. Of the type that Assad and other Baathists are notorious for, and the Baathists were in many ways, I think, supported by the CIA and put in power by them as a counterbalance to more radical leftist, more like, well, actual leftist parties. They're basically fascist. They're like the Nazi, you know, kind of Arab version of Nazis. I mean, not to say they're on the same level as the Nazis, I don't know, but similar ideology and history and probably pretty direct connections, actually. So anyway, there's just, and yeah, Gaddafi was scum. Like all these like governments are like, the world is run by scum. Like people who are so naive and think like, oh, Europe is great, or the world is, you know, other countries are all just like, yeah, the US is the worst in a lot of ways, but every government is like, and well, certainly a lot of governments, and likely every government is tyrannizing over its people in myriad ways. And if you're shilling for them, then that makes you a shill. I don't know. It doesn't help your cause, and it corrupts your position overall. So that's my spiel.